Friends, we don't have an epidemic of loneliness, depression, suicides, anxieties. No, my friends, there is something more pernicious going on in our lives. And in this video, you're going to understand what has been going on in your life that made relationships and being gay so challenging, so frustrating, and the struggle that comes with it so deep and painful. Let me share with you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this exhibit. I call this the pile of hurt or the pile of shit. Hence, the title for this video is the big pile of shit that is inside of us. And we're going to understand it. And this exhibit will guide us to do that. We're going to introduce more advanced concepts of psychology. We're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. Very simple. I'm going to make this very easy for you to understand. We're going to talk about sensation seeking. This is connected to cognitive dissonance, and this will blow your mind. You're going to realize that all the things about sexual compatibility, all the things about search for big penises and rough sex, that is part of sensation seeking. We're going to talk about the mental health differential. This is a little bit more complicated, but you need to understand this because this is the healing pathway. You want to dissolve the pile of shit, the pile of hurt, and basically work your way backwards and then upwards. And in this exhibit, you're going to understand exactly what that means. Before we do all of that, I do want to offer us a reminder. And I did this in the previous video, and I want to do it again because this is so important. So here it is. Closeness is the most powerful medicine for all hurt, pain, and fear. If you right now feel fear, pain, or any hurt, so that means depression, anxieties, what is the medicine for that? Not popping pills, not getting drunk, not doing drugs. That will only delay the healing that has to happen later. What has to happen is this, closeness. And when we talk about the big pile of shit, that big pile of shit has to be part of the conversation inside a container of intimacy and closeness. So closeness is the way to go, my friends. But obviously we struggle to create it because that pile of shit is standing in the way. So we need a methodology that's lighter. And that's spirituality through spiritual practices of togetherness and unity. So as opposed to going to church and pray, it's great that you do that or meditate. This is the way to heal from a lot of the difficulties that we're experiencing because we need intimacy and closeness. And if we are avoiding it by going to churches and meditating, you're not dissolving that pile of shit that we're going to talk about in a moment. We need spirituality as an entry into that togetherness at a moment when we don't want that togetherness. So this actually is a way to break through the contradictions and the conflicted internal states that are in all of us, and experience that closeness and intimacy. That's the healing that we all need. So from this day forward, when you think about spirituality, think about togetherness and unity, because that's what spirituality is. And through our communication here, through everything that we're doing inside Big Gay Family Social Program, it's all in the context of spiritual practices. Through spiritual practices, we open our hearts, our minds, our spirits to one another. And that is what gives you the healing that you need right now and that you're going to need for the near future. So spirituality is the pathway to togetherness and unity, and that provides the container for closeness and intimacy, and that's where we can resolve whatever needs to be resolved. Also, I'm going to say a few statements about being single today and frustrated with dating. If you're single and if you're frustrated with dating, just remember, it's not your fault. We have been traumatized and divided. And that's why it's so difficult to bring that healing container to all of us, to unload that pile of shit. that pile of hurt. And that's why we just basically bump against each other with anger, with frustration. We can't connect because there's so much of that pile of shit that needs to be dissolved. And we only search for sensation seeking, which is hardcore, painful interactions that are unloading parts of that pile of shit, but uploading it at the top. And you're going to see the mechanics of this in a moment. So it's very difficult for us to come together. We've been traumatized. We've been divided. It's not your fault that you are single and frustrated, because the concepts of psychology that we talk about today, they are very advanced. It took me a long time to understand them, and I work in this 24/7. So we are basically victims of this very complicated situation in the gay world that is part of shame, part of trauma, part of anger, cognitive dissonance, and all kinds of complicated psychological states that make it almost impossible for most of us to really get to the bottom of what is going on here with us. Why are we saying we want friends, but then we can't have them? Why are we so contradictory in our approach to each other? And so we're going to understand a lot of that today. I promise you, you will be transformed. This is one of the most important videos I'm recording for you. And I know I keep saying that every time I do a video, because my understanding of this gets deeper and deeper and more sophisticated, and I'm able to translate this for you. So it seems like every video is better than the other one, but stay with me here. I promise you, we are on the verge of revolution, of the understanding of what is really going on with all of us, with sex, the shadow sex, shadow life, shadow attraction, because it's all interconnected. And on top of all of that, shadow is the pile of shit, pile of hurt that sets the trauma cycle into motion. Once we understand this, my friends, there will be so much love pouring into our community that whatever struggles you've had in your past about relationships, dating, and making it work, that's going to all be dissolved, because I believe in your power of intellectual understanding. I believe that you have what it takes inside you, and this understanding will unlock it, and you will set yourself free. You'll set your heart free, and in general, you'll be able to be in a much greater state of neutrality and peace. And out of that, whatever you've struggled with is going to be no longer holding you back anymore to the same degree. So please stay with me in this video. And if you haven't watched my other videos, please go back to watch them, because they also set into motion a lot of the concepts that we are going to cover today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you want to take this deeper, take the free course that's available on the homepage of Big A Family website. Go to the homepage, there's a free course. Please take advantage of it. It will help you dealing with the pain and the fear. It will introduce you to Buddhist techniques and to reframes about sexuality. Please do it, because there is education about this that's important. You won't be able to set yourself free if you don't educate yourself about some of these psychological concepts. So please do it. Go to bigafamily.com, take the free course. And also I added a quiz to help you discover whether you are suffering from trauma right now. So there's the free course, and also there's the quiz about trauma. Please take advantage of it. It will speed up your healing and your transformation. Okay, my friends, we are now ready to talk about the big pile of shit, the big pile of hurt, which is what that is. We're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk about sensation seeking. And it's helpful as we open this frame of conversation that we review a few items here. One of them is that gay men are not fully out. So I'm going to use this exhibit here again, and let's talk about, are we out or not? And gay men are not out, because to be fully out, we have to exist in this wholesome experience of one another, including emotional connections with one another on a regular basis, spiritual connections, intellectual conversations, and then sex as part of that. That's the wholesome version. Because we are only sexual, most of us on the hookup apps and just in general, we can't say authentically that we are out. You are not fully out. I perhaps am a little bit more out because I work with gay men on a regular basis. on a multidimensional level, but most gay men are not out because we don't have that contact with each other that's multidimensional. It's only sex. And so there will be a big part of our consciousness that never has reached expression. So our gayness is the mini-me gayness, the mini-you. And so when we date each other, is the mini-me, mini-he, and how is that ever going to lead to a beautiful relationship? It's not. We're going to basically be triggered the moment that those other parts are going to be activated. We're going to see that there's no commonality because those other parts of us have never been developed. And this is part of socialization. When you look at the psychology of human development, there's the individuation, and that's the identity. And that's where we are underdeveloped. Starting with the identity, the gay identity is only about sex for most of us, and it has to be expanded into spirituality, emotion, and intellectual engagements with one another. So on an identity level, with individuation, we even begin with this underdevelopment. And then socialization has not taken place properly because the identity is weak. The socialization is only about the sex. So think about it. From the human development perspective, because we're not fully out, we're not properly socialized. And so there is a price to pay for that, and the price to pay for that is what we're going to talk about today. So we're not fully socialized, and then there's the domestication, which is the entry into relationships. We try to be socialized with our lovers, and that doesn't work. It creates too much tension. It's too much going on with relationships. When we try to do human development processes at home, in the kitchen, it's not going to work. We have to do it with each other, with 30, 40, 50 men before we get into relationships with one person in a romantic context. So this is the big picture here. We're not properly individuated. We're not properly socialized. Therefore, domestication, one-on-one romantic relationship with one person is going to suffer tremendously because all that individuation and socialization has to be now placed in the kitchen with your lover. And that's just a recipe for a lot of disaster, conflicts, and betrayals and complicated situations. So this is the kind of big picture I want to share with you. We're not fully out, and that's why we are suffering. Our identities are weak. There's no proper socialization, and therefore relationships are just going to be so chaotic. But there is something even more pernicious going on, and that's how we're going to now enter into the big pile of shit that's going on with all of us. So let's start with the question. Have you noticed that on one end we talk about the epidemic of loneliness, but it kind of doesn't make any sense? Because if we are so lonely, then if you wanted a friend, if you could have a friend, well, that would make sense. Then a friend would put an end to loneliness, right? So if I'm a lonely person and I feel upset about being lonely, then how about I get myself a friend? So if I can't have a lover, let's say I can't even have sex, well, there's something that's left. I can have a friend. But have you noticed that it's even more difficult to have a friend than to have a lover? Why? Why is it so much more difficult to find multiple friends, and yet we say to ourselves, we are lonely? It makes no sense. I remember when I first moved to Denver, I was looking for hiking buddies on Grindr hookup apps. And I thought to myself, wait a second, why can't I find a hiking buddy? Why is it so difficult to find someone to do things with outside of sex, outside of love? And so now I understand why this is happening. And you're going to understand this right now. It's going to blow your mind. Because I'm sure you noticed this, that you want a friend, but nobody wants it. They just want to know, how big is your dick? Are you going to fuck them? Are you going to do hardcore things with them? But friendships? No, that's not enough. So you're going to understand why this is happening. It's kind of funny to talk about it, but it's quite serious because we lack friendships, and friendships are really what helps you unload a lot of the hurt and what helps you experience positive emotional loops, which is part of the healing process. So it's fun to talk about this, but seriously, it's quite painful to experience this. because we have to live our lives, expand and grow, and we can't do that. We feel frozen and stuck, most of us. Okay, so how do we begin this? We begin this with the understanding that as we live our lives, as we begin our lives as gay men, we enter into an already traumatic container called being gay. And because we enter into it, we start with it, we don't even realize that we start in a toxic container. And we think that there's nothing wrong with it. So whenever we struggle with friendships or relationships, we're kind of like, oh, it's them, or it's you. But it's not he nor you. It's the traumatic container into which we are coming out, you can say. So that is the starting point to understand. It's a traumatic container, so many irregularities, so many breakdowns. Your family rejects you. You're coming across closeted guys, bisexual guys, all these different men with emotional unavailability. Some gay men hide who they are. All of that is trauma. It's not normal. Like straight people, most of the time, they don't experience any of it, but we do. And we just say, whatever, I'm just going to go to the next person. We think, okay, I'm just going to go to a bar, pick somebody up and just go about my life. But what we don't realize, underneath all of it, we are being traumatized. When you log into Grindr, when you look at all the pictures of people and when you interact with people and you're swiping left to right, that creates trauma in the way that your brain perceives this. Because it's not normal to look at all the hundreds of people but not have one healthy connection with one of them. That's not normal to the brain. It's helpful to go backwards in time to notice how things were in 80s, in the 90s. Back then, when you wanted to interact with people, you probably would interact with 3 people a month. And when you had a rejection or when you had something toxic, it would happen once a month or twice a month. And that was okay because your brain could handle that. And so I'm guiding you now to get into the territory of what cognitive dissonance is. So in the past, there were just a few experiences of hurt and toxicity. But now there are hundreds of them on a weekly basis. And when you look at our ability to heal all of that, that eventually we cross the threshold where our brains can actually understand and process all the negativity that we are exposed to. So if you, for example, hire a therapist and you go to the therapist and you tell them, my mom abandoned me, or my father is a narcissist, for 1 hour or for 5 hours, 5 different sessions, you're going to process just one situation of your father or mother abandoning you. So it takes a long time to process painful situations. However, when you have a lot of these painful situations happening so fast, your brain has to approach it differently. And that is how we enter into the complexity of trauma, complexity of cognitive dissonance, and just general advanced areas of psychology, because now we are in a different territory. We are no longer in the normal existence. We are in what's called coping with a lot of the pain. And your brain, your mind has to utilize different mechanisms to help you be normal. So here's how it works. Right now, most of us, or over the past 5 years, we've been using the hookup apps. We've been coming across a lot of people. And every time you have a negative reaction, your brain remembers that. And that trauma, which is that irregularity we experience with one another, lack of consistency, ghosting, people judge each other, reject each other. They say they want to show up to date you, but they're afraid to call you. They're afraid to commit to the engagements and the interactions. All of that is trauma. Now, we don't think it's trauma because we have been desensitized over the years, but that's trauma. If you have hundreds of these traumas, it eventually creates this pile of shit that we're going to call pile of hurt. You can call it whatever you want, but let's call it pile of hurt. So basically, over time, your consciousness is going to keep adding and adding and adding to this pile of hurt, so much so that eventually your brain will not be able to handle it. Okay? And your brain is going to create a state of mind such that you will no longer feel that pain, that pile of shit, that hurt, that trauma, and so that you can exist and function in some way. Because if you had to process all of this pain, there's not enough time for your brain, for your life, to process all of the individual instances of that pain and that hurt. So instead, your brain creates a state called cognitive dissonance where you don't feel this pain anymore. You don't feel this trauma anymore because you are in a different state of mind called cognitive dissonance. You can think about cognitive dissonance as your brain's intentional disempowerment or disabling of your mind, where you no longer feel the pain, all the layers of trauma stacked on top of one another, and you can function kind of pseudo-normal, not exactly normal, because that disability of your mind, that cognitive dissonance, disempowers you in a big way, but at least you don't have to deal with that hurt and that trauma. This is very common with trauma. I've experienced this with my own parents because both of my parents are narcissistic, and I didn't feel the trauma. If somebody told me, Paul, are you traumatized? I said, no way. I don't feel any trauma. I don't feel anything. But that's exactly what cognitive dissonance is. It disables your perception of the hurt by disabling your mind's, certain parts of your mind that has access to that feeling of trauma, feeling of hurt, pain, especially if it's chronic. And this is, my friends, what most of us are experiencing. You can't feel trauma. You can't feel many of the emotion of shame. And the way to feel it is through another mechanism called sensation seeking. Sensation seeking. So cognitive dissonance comes with sensation seeking. They're interconnected. Sensation seeking is the way that that your mind is going to want you to unload the pile of hurt. So this is the pile of hurt. This is the shadow life underneath the pile of hurt. All of the interactions with men, our lives, goals, our perception of reality is affected by the pile of hurt that we don't feel. We have sex and attraction that also becomes influenced by this. We'll talk about this in a moment. But the main thing here is that you will want to unload from the bottom of this pile of hurt, unload that pain. And you're going to do that through sensation seeking. And that is the reason why gay men don't want friends. Because when you say, I want a friend, the person automatically, unconsciously realizes that it's going to be longer term and they will not be able to unload this pain. So friendships are not desired because they do not provide an opportunity for sensation seeking, for unloading of the pain. So instead, we want to be fucked by really big dicks, have our asses stretched in the biggest way possible, because that is how you connect yourself to this pile of shit, emotional, traumatized part of you that's hiding deeply, deeply inside you that otherwise cannot be accessed. So there are a whole bunch of emotions that we can't access directly. They are part of this pile of shit, covered by cognitive dissonance, so you don't feel it. And the only way to access it is by hardcore, volatile, shameful, humiliation kind of interactions. And that's why sexual compatibility is at the forefront for most gay men, not because sexual compatibility is going to solve any answers. It never really leads to anything, but the perception is that it will provide an opportunity to unload the pile of shit. But as we unload this pile of shit, we set into motion cycle of trauma because we, at the same time, upload more to the top. So we unload some of it, but because these interactions are toxic, they're hurtful, they often involve narcissistic men who hurt us, who just want to fuck us, who just want to basically hurt us, humiliate us. They don't want to connect emotionally. So we stack another layer of hurt on top of this. And this goes on and on and on like this. And we exist in the shadow of this cycle of trauma. We unload the pain that we can't feel. It's unloaded through sexual behavior or through abusive behavior. narcissistic partners, we also upload more hurt and more trauma on top of this pile of shit. So we remove some of it, but then we add on top of it even more. And this is the cycle that lasts for 20, 30, 40 years for all of us. Obviously, I now pay attention to this, and many of you know I don't participate in anal intercourse because of how I know this. I don't want to be adding to the pile of shit, and I want to release my own pain, which I have this too. I'm not exempt from this. I have this pile of shit too, but I unload it through psychedelics. I unload it through journaling. I unload it through the positive emotional loops that I have with the people in my life. So this is, my friends, what causes us to enter into the cycle of trauma. And as a result of it, we live in the shadow of that cycle of trauma. So the assumption is that we're going to have these hurtful, violent situations, and they're not going to affect us on a deeper level. But they do, because they bring another layer to the top of the pile of shit, and they do something more. Are you ready for this? Because this is going to blow your mind. Because our erections are biological sensations, our trauma cycle and our cognitive dissonance, that's part of it, that covers that up, is going to affect who you are attracted to, is going to affect your biological impulses, mainly with men, erection, and your formula for attraction. So if we live underneath this pile of hurt, the cognitive dissonance and the cycle of trauma is going to imprint onto you desires that will be connected to sensation seeking as a way of unloading that pain. This will affect your sex life, because you're going to be searching for narcissistic men, and men who will bring volatility and will bring the expression and unloading of the pain. As a result of that, as years are passing by, you're going to have shadow attraction. Basically, you're going to be attracted, and your erection will only be available with men that are going to be violent, volatile, or abusive. And that's why you often see when you watch porn on some guys, they have to be told, fuck yeah, fuck me, yeah, fuck my hole, yeah, do all that crazy stuff. They say that to one another because their attraction now, their arousal, their mechanism of erection have been affected by the sensation seeking. That's part of the unloading of this pile of hurt in their lives. And therefore, this cycle of trauma by the changes of sexuality and attraction is almost impossible to heal until the person usually enters into a catastrophic crisis where everything has to change and it's a life-threatening situation. Because think about it. At a certain moment, after interacting with toxic people, narcissistic people, and abusive people, and if you use them to unload this hurt, this anger, this shame, eventually you're retraining the psychology of attraction inside you and your erection and arousal mechanisms. Often where this leads is that if you're with a man, so let's say if you and I were naked, I would be saying loving things to you. For example, it's nice to be here with you. I'm glad we're here together. So imagine we are naked and I say these things to you. Most people would be cringing, like, that's weird. Don't say that. I want you to fuck me. I want you to do this, that, and the other to me. I want you to bend me over and do all kinds of things. But if I don't do that, then the person will no longer be aroused. Their erection will go down immediately. And that's how this cycle damages all of us in such a deep way, because it's so difficult to spot this. It's so difficult to understand this that most gay men, in the absence of a therapeutic intervention, in the absence of just absolutely cutting off all these toxic men, they will not have an opportunity to heal, and they simply deepen. They go into the rabbit hole deeper and deeper into the shadow attraction, into the shadow sexuality, and as a result, shadow life. When we are inside of cognitive dissonance, remember, it's this disabling of your mind. This doesn't just disable your mind with relationships with sex or attraction. This disables your mind in an all-around kind of way. This almost like, it's kind of like a disability in general, where you are brought into the space of indifference and avoidance and ambivalence. Because this pile of shit, or pile of hurt, I apologize if I try to be too dramatic about this. This pile of hurt is so big that for your mind to deal with it, it has to take you into a state of not seeing that. So that's ambivalence. That's indifference. And how does this work in the broader way? It's that when you want to set goals, you just say, I don't care about setting goals. If you have big dreams, all of a sudden, you don't care about your big dreams. Most gay men don't have a vision for their lives. Most gay men are not aspiring to be leaders, which is one reason why a lot of this suffering in the culture is perpetuated. Why don't we have those leaders? Because they're stuck in this cycle of trauma. They're unloading their hurt and uploading new hurt, and they are in a state of ambivalence, indifference, massive disempowerment. And when you tell them, hey, don't you want to take a course about leadership? They're not interested, because they're not in a state where they can appreciate growth, learning, and transformation. So this is, my friends, the reason why our culture is dying. This is the reason why we are all dying with it. This is the reason why most gay men will never have normal relationships for the rest of their lives, because they're in a shadow. They live in the shadow of this pile of hurt. This shadow causes them to have a lens into their world that is not the authentic lens through which you can have normal relationships. Their lens is influenced by the ability to unload their hurt and their pain. If they don't see that opportunity to unload that hurt or pain, they don't want to be with you. That's another reason, in addition to the anger and shame that we project onto one another, that's the reason why bottoms hate each other. Because one bottom looks at another bottom, and he will not get that pain unloaded, because he's not going to be fucked really hard by another bottom. So that's why, to them, sexual compatibility is the foundation for everything, because sexual compatibility is not really compatibility. It's an opportunity to unload the pain that otherwise cannot be felt, which is anger, shame, a lot of the experiences of trauma. These emotions cannot be felt directly. We need other mechanisms to access those areas. And pain, humiliation, getting fucked by big dicks, getting our asses stretched and causing pain is the way to come in contact with that shame, with that hurt, and the pile of shit that's inside all of us. So what is the solution to all of this? The solution to all of this is obviously first to become aware of this. I would recommend that you study trauma on your own. Highly recommend you take the quiz on the page biggayfamily.com so that you actually can experience the knowledge about what trauma is, and that you stop the exposure to toxic people. So once you become aware of this, then you have to stop the exposure to toxic people. You become aware of your sensation seeking. Sensation seeking is really the proof that there's something inside you going on that may be difficult for you even to feel it. So whether this is addictions, violent sex, stretching of your ass by big objects and big penises, humiliation, and being with men who are abusive, that is all part of sensation seeking, including emotional eating, including being distracted from your projects, from your goals in your life. All of this is in the category of sensation seeking. This knowledge, my friends, transformed my life. I am in a state of extraordinary achievement and high performance and ability because I finally accepted that I've been traumatized big time by all kinds of things. My parents, my mother, my father, my sibling, and all the past boyfriends, and a lot of the gay men that have entered my life previously, and they created a rapture. They added to the pile of shit. And I stopped the sensation seeking. I introduced meditation. I have reliable friends now, and I interact with people through completions of emotional cycles, and I'm able to heal myself. And of course, psychedelics and daily self-reflection, daily journaling, and completely 100% cutting off every toxic person, every toxic situation, because that's what you have to do as part of your healing. So now let's talk about the big idea here called mental health differential. So the healing of this pile of shit has to happen by recognizing that you are right here. So this is the shadow. After all these negative experiences, obviously there's a lot more than just 4 of them. You experience hundreds, 200, maybe even 1,000 of these toxic situations over the course of 5, 10, 20, 30 years. You enter into a space of cognitive dissonance, kind of like disassociation, detachment as a way to not feel it. And that's cognitive dissonance. Sometimes we can call it a state of denial where you don't even know that you are traumatized. And that's this state here. And what you need to do is work your way backwards and then integrate the other parts of your identity. So here you see that the reason why you went down is because everything was about sex. And because of that, you did not get your needs met and you wanted to compensate with sex. And that's how you invited all the toxic people, all the violent sex, all the humiliation to compensate for the things that are missing. And as a result, these loops led you to where you are today. And this is the trauma, shame, and then anger. We talked about that in previous videos. Please go back, watch previous videos to understand that. So this is the trauma cycle, the trauma, the shame, and the anger. And then as a result of it, shadow life, because the sensation seeking will invite even more hurt and re-traumatization. And we live underneath all of that. And so this cycle continues obviously forever. So you need to work your way backwards here. That often involves therapeutic intervention. You will have to, depending obviously on each situation, each person will be different, but you'll have to actually identify all of those traumatic situations, most of them, if you want to really recapture your healthy identity, and you work yourself backwards here, and then you integrate the spiritual, the emotional, and the intellectual parts of your identity, and that's another forward ascension loop. And this difference between where you are today, where you have to be, is called the mental health differential. How many positive emotional loops do you have to experience in order to heal from all of this and work your way up to full integration of your identity? And that means that you'll probably have to experience 30 to 50 positive emotional loops without any toxicity, without any rapture, any shame, any sensation seeking. And guess what? That will be a foreign territory for most of you. Because it's like in the situation where 2 bottoms come together, one is going to say, no, sorry, I don't want to interact with you because you're not going to fuck me really hard. So we're basically talking about this situation where you come across other people, you're not going to be hurt, fucked, or abused by them anymore. And that may feel strange. That actually will feel awkward to most gay men because they want that rapture. They've been habituated, they've been conditioning themselves for many years, often decades, to only seek the rapture, to only seek the volatility, the stretching of the ass, the deep, violent fucking that's happening. Otherwise, they're not interested. So you'll have to enter into a container. That's why the Big Gay Family Social Program is, in my opinion, the only way you can experience this, because you have to be in a community where you're experiencing other people in a loving, healthy way without conversation about sex, without, in many cases, seeing each other, so that the triggers, the sensation-seeking triggers don't kick in. And instead, you gently desensitize yourself from a lot of the violent activities and bring yourself into the loving, kind, slower paced, gentler emotional loops that you have with each person. One emotional loop is 3 interactions. So if you need to heal yourself, you'll need 30 to 50 of these loops. 30 divided by 3 is 10. 10 people to 30 new people in your life have to be part of your healing, with whom you're not going to have any conversation about sex at all. In many cases, you won't even see them for the first 30 to 60 days. And that is how you awaken your emotions, how you awaken your spirit, how you awaken your intellectual conversations. Your intellect comes on board. You all of a sudden have boundaries. You build up standards. And that's how you protect yourself from the upload of the new trauma, new hurt onto the pile of hurt, the pile of shit. So the standards, the boundaries that you're developing, that's when your mind comes on board with your identity. All of a sudden someone wants to fuck you. You say, no thanks, I don't want to be fucked. And then you stop the unloading of the pain. And that unloading of the pain is happening in a more therapeutic dimension with the healthy emotional interactions. You actually are practicing communication skills that have to do with the disclosure of your pain. All of it, even the kind of pain, the hurt that you're uncomfortable to share, including the sexual activities that are hurting you, all of this has to come to the surface inside of a conversation with another human being and them not walking away from you. And that is how they validate that pain inside you. Your brain realizes, oh, this is a healthy way. And your brain says, I'm going to give you even more of that access to that trauma and that pile of shit. Unload it in a healthy, loving way. Eventually, 6 months pass by, a year pass by, and you stop the uploading of the new shit. You stopped unloading of this shit through violent interactions. And this is now shrinking. And you are now integrating more of your identity and you become whole again. Cognitive dissonance is going away. Your disempowerment is going away. Your disassociation, a lot of the complexities are going away. And now when you want to have a lover, you don't care top and bottom because you don't need to unload any pain anymore. Your attraction is now about the qualities of the ability to love, kindness, sincerity, authenticity, care. That now becomes attractive. And you are completely shifting everything about gay life. This is almost like a new world that you enter into, a new chance to experience yourself in a very different way. This is, my friends, what has to be done if you want to no longer live in the shadow of a lot of that pile of shit. And instead, you want to dissolve that and then live authentically with other gay men in beautiful, romantic relationships that no longer are threatened by the re-exposure to trauma, by the triggering of the anger and the pain that is inside you. You now can have a healthy identity. So your individuation is completed. Then through the emotional loops, you socialize your healthy identity. And now domestication becomes a real thing, becomes a real possibility. And you welcome your lover into your life without all the complexities from the past, without all the details about fetishes, about kinky stuff, and your arousal, your sexual attraction, everything about sex is stabilizing, is normalizing because you're now fully on. Your emotions are activated, your spirituality is on board, and your intellectual part of your identity are also there as boundaries, standards to protect you, to guide you. And sex is now part of all of that. This is, my friends, what has to be done on a mass level in the gay world. Unfortunately, this kind of intervention, because it's so sophisticated, it is not going to happen on Grindr. It's not going to happen on any hookup apps. It's not going to even happen on the dating platforms. And often it will not happen in the offices of a psychologist, because what we're talking about here is a combination of introductions, meeting new people, coaching, education, courses, learning, undoing. This will take 6 months to a year at a minimum. And for that, you need a community. You need a community where this healing is possible. Without that, this simply cannot be done. And that's why most gay men will live in the shadow of the pile of shit for the rest of their lives, choosing lovers to unload that pain, not because they want to be with them, but because they're unconsciously sensation seeking. And as a result of that, choosing lovers to be an outlet for that. And these lovers usually go away the moment that they are beginning the healing journey. That's why a lot of gay men, they actually hate their past lovers, because the more you grow, the more you ascend spiritually, you realize everybody from the past was injuring you, was hurting you, and you don't want to remain in contact. You don't want this dynamic to last until you're 60, because then you find out everybody from your life was toxic and you have to reinvent yourself every 5 years and start with new people, only to find out that even then these people are toxic for you, and then you have to restart your life at 70. So this is very serious. Most gay men will not have access to this kind of therapeutic approach, and unfortunately for most of them, this will never become a reality. And it is your job, if you can give yourself this gift of this restoration, rejuvenation, and healing, to do it as soon as possible, because time is of essence. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done, lots of conversations, lots of coaching sessions, lots of education. If you don't begin now, you delay it and you add to the pile of shit every time you interact with others, because you are living in the shadow of a lot of that unresolved pain. So if you have the ability to give that gift to yourself, give it to yourself now, because time is of essence. And to do that, join us at the Big Gay Family Social Program, where all of this can happen for you and the opportunity for beautiful friendships and relationships can become real. Join us at the program. You'll be offered coaching, you'll be offered introductions and courses and advanced tools for emotional communication, for openness and transformation. You'll get access directly to me and all the things I'm sharing with you in this video and in previous videos. Take this incredibly seriously, because part of the cognitive dissonance is the state of ambivalence, where we don't notice the passage of time, where we think that one day, some way, a lover will occur, some lover will somehow happen in your life. It will never happen that way, because part of that cognitive dissonance is the hiding of the reality of what needs to happen to transform yourself. You will need education, you will need a plan, you will need methodology for healing, you'll need to study this subject matter through and through on your own. You won't be able just to passively understand this. You'll need to become an expert in this area to actually address this completely and fully. So this will take a long time, and there is no simple answer to this. There's absolutely no shortcut. And if you're in a state of ambivalence and avoidance and indifference about this, that's what cognitive dissonance does to our brains. This disempowerment is ambivalence. And that's why this cycle of trauma is what most gay men experience for the rest of their lives. And they never have a truly pure, loving experience. They never have a true friend. Everything is toxic from top to bottom. Everything is toxic from left to right all the time, most of the times, for most gay men. And this is, my friends, why this video is so important, why this idea is so crucial to your understanding and your breakthrough. Because we're talking about trauma here, not loneliness, not addictions, alcoholism, and drugs. That happens down the road. We're talking about here is trauma that most of you don't feel directly. And that's why this is so difficult to communicate. This is so difficult to bring to people's attention. And that's why I spent so much time preparing for this video, so that now you have a chance to address this once and for all. So I'm celebrating today with this video, this knowledge, this awareness. I believe the revolution of love is going to happen in the gay community because of ideas like these, and spreading these ideas, awakening people to the realization we've been so hurt, we've been so traumatized, and we continue this trauma in our lives, that this is why our community is dying, we're dying with it, and how we need a radical intervention. This is it, my friends. This is the radical intervention that you need to give to yourself, and we need to promote this with each other. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm here for you to educate you about these ideas. I will continue recording these videos. I'm going to talk more about cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk more about the mental health differential. We're going to talk about the shadow sex, shadow life, shadow attraction, as much as you need to, so that we can all understand it, and so that sex is no longer standing between us, so that sex is not a reason why you choose somebody toxic over somebody loving. And that's why this is so critical. So thanks for listening. Please subscribe to my channel if you're new, and if you're not part of Big Gay Family, join us at the Big Gay Family Social Program. To put all of this to use, visit the website biggayfamily.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.